Now, do INFJs have really high expectations of others, maybe especially significant others in relationships? And if so, where does it come from? If not, why would that not be the case? I mean, it's something that we hear a lot about INFJs. They have high expectations in friendships and in romantic relationships. It's really explained why, and it's really explained why the alternative isn't true, namely that maybe their expectations are not as high as we think. I think both are true. You will find INFJs whose expectations are quite high, and usually those expectations are high as a projective mechanism of the expectations they set on themselves, particularly in moral matters. So the traditional INFJ, not the spinner, has often a quite demanding, tyrannical superego, very high moral standards, tends toward obsessiveness, not quite OCD, but obsessive personality structures, ruminates a lot about what's right, what's wrong, what they should do, what they shouldn't do, doubts themselves. All these are signs of ambivalence linked to strong superego, maybe overly inflated superego. Often INFJs can learn to be happier by relaxing the superego. But usually if you have a strong superego, you're always going to try to find ways of relaxing it. And unless you really reflect on it, unless you do therapy perhaps, or analysis, you might not find the most optimal ways of relieving the pressure and the guilt and the demands and the shame sometimes that the superego imposes on you. What's a typical suboptimal strategy? Projection, right? One of the most primitive ego mechanisms of defense, projection onto other people. And so you project those standards onto others, so you can judge them instead of judging yourself. Insofar as INFJs are a type of population for whom high moral demands, sometimes moral masochism, and self-defeating behavior, are common occurrences, you're necessarily going to see these strategies about projection involved in the life of INFJs, both around friendships and perhaps even more so around relationships. It also presents the interesting advantage, if we can call it that, of giving the INFJs justifications for not pursuing romantic relationships, because they might think to themselves, well, my standards are so high in the moral domain in particular, that the really special person is most likely not going to appear in my life. Now that in itself is moral masochism and self-defeating behavior, but all of this is a vicious circle, and it is very complex and has complicated ramifications. But not all INFJs are going to be like that. For one, the spinning INFJ is not going to have those issues necessarily. I think the thing about the spinning INFJ is that they will tend to not know what their expectations are, because they struggle around their own identity formation and what they want. They don't know what they want because they don't know who they are. So these INFJs will not have high expectations, they won't have low expectations, they'll tend to lack consistency toward themselves and toward the other people in their own internal world and in communication with other people, lack consistency about what it is they expect, which is an issue in relationships too. Okay? And finally, you have another kind of INFJ who may very well be an INFJ with a high superego, but who chooses to deal with their guilt and their high moral demands, sometimes tyrannical and masochistic, in another way than projection. Or rather, they do projection, but it's not the kind of projection that ends up blaming the other person for failing moral standards. It's the nurse syndrome. It's when the INFJ is engaged in a compulsive quest of repair. They project the need for them to repair themselves onto a repair of the other person. And of course, the nurse syndrome is not a good thing. It's also a vicious circle. And in fact, it can keep you in relationships that are legitimately failing the standards you should set for yourself. But maybe your self-esteem by that point is so low that unconsciously or consciously you don't think you deserve better. So notice this, in this case, it's the opposite. The INFJ is not honoring standards that are high enough for what they should expect in a relationship. And that's the context in which often what you'll find is a compulsion to repair, which, you know, in ordinary language we call the nurse syndrome. Let me know in the comments what you thought, guys. Give me a like if you enjoyed the video. Don't forget about my 2 books on the INFJ. The Ecstatic Soul, which is the deepest investigation of the INFJ mind. The link is below. As well as the Infinite Soul, which is all about life of the INFJ in the modern world and its challenges. See you soon, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.